Hey guys. Tonight we march. Not into battle, not into glory, but into the jungle. The air is thick enough to sip. Your sandals are already damp, and somewhere beyond the trees, a small group of sculptors is about to make something enormous out of a rock you wouldn't even know how to sit on. Welcome to the misty lowlands of ancient Mesoamerica, where the Olmec civilization is preparing to carve one of its famously colossal heads. You probably won't survive this. Not from danger, but from sheer humidity and the amount of mosquito bites you're about to spiritually accumulate. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me, where are you listening from, and what time is it where you are? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're trudging now, slowly, behind a pair of barefooted men carrying tools that look like they've been borrowed from a rock-obsessed ghost. There's no trail, just damp undergrowth and the odd flash of something slithering off the path. You duck beneath a hanging vine, the leaves dripping with early morning fog, and follow the distant sound of voices shouting over stone. The jungle opens up at last, and there it is. A clearing littered with tools and surrounded by watchful trees. People move through it like they're dancing and working at the same time. Some carrying ropes, others grinding pigments. A few sitting and sharpening hammerstones in the corners like they've got a date with destiny and a particularly stubborn boulder. This is where the Olmecs are preparing to sculpt one of their legendary stone heads, massive, brooding, beautifully frowning faces that, somehow, manage to look bored, regal, and faintly disappointed all at once. Historians still argue whether these heads represent specific rulers, deified ancestors, or symbolic warriors. Some say they were commemorative monuments. Others claim they were part of a religious or cosmic ritual, tied to celestial calendars and sacred alignments. A few believe they were a kind of political flex. Look what I can do with 20 tons of volcanic rock. Here's your quirky tidbit. One of the known heads, discovered miles from its basalt source, appears to have been dragged over 50 miles without the benefit of wheels. Archaeologists are still arguing over whether that feat makes the Olmecs brilliant engineers, or just profoundly stubborn. You're not carving anything yet. First, you're just watching. The sculptors, bare-chested, quiet, focused, circle a rock the size of a small truck. It's irregular, partly moss-covered, and deeply unimpressed by your presence. One of the older men taps it with a stone mallet. Not to test it, to greet it. He bows his head. Others murmur something. You don't understand the words, but the tone is unmistakable. This isn't just a rock. It's a future ancestor. You sit on a low stump and wipe your forehead. A beetle the size of your thumb decides your leg is a nice place to live. You do not argue. And then it hits you. This is going to take weeks. Maybe months. Maybe longer. There are no chisels. No cranes. No instruction manuals. Just people, stone, and time. You hear the first clear tap of hammer against basalt, ringing out like a countdown to a transformation that hasn't even begun. The jungle watches. And so do you. The jungle is already steaming before the sun clears the canopy. You're sweating through your linen tunic, or what's left of it, and your sandals have begun a slow, soggy rebellion against the mud. But none of that matters, because today you're following a group of men on what might be the most impractical treasure hunt in history. Looking for a rock too large to move, and then planning to move it anyway. You're in the Tuxtla Mountains now, where the ground isn't just lumpy, it rolls. You stumble behind a quarrying team armed with wooden levers, coiled vines, and the kind of determination usually found in people who've never had to meet a deadline. They pause at a ridge. Below, half hidden in a grove of trees, is what you've been looking for. A massive, half-buried basalt boulder. Dark, veined with streaks of iron and time, it sits there like it's been waiting specifically for you to arrive and make a poor life choice. The sculptors gather in a circle. One of them squats, places his palm on the stone's surface, and just stays there a moment, like he's listening to the rock breathe. Or maybe just trying to figure out if it's the right shape for a forehead. Historians still argue whether the Olmecs chose boulders based purely on size and availability, or if each one had to feel right. Some theories suggest spiritual guidance, signs from dreams, or even sacred geography determined which stones were destined to become heads. Others think the sculptors were just really good at seeing a face where the rest of us see a rock and a backache. Your quirky tidbit? A few heads show signs of being recarved, possibly from older monuments. One theory is that newer rulers inherited stones and had previous faces reworked into their own likeness. Which, honestly, is a power move worthy of its own sitcom. Everybody loves legacy basalt. Now comes the hard part. Moving it. The stone is enormous. At least 6 feet tall, 8 feet across, and the weight of several angry elephants. There are no pulleys, no carts, no secret alien levitation beams. Just a plan involving vines, wooden sleds, and the hope that gravity forgets to do its job for a few weeks. You help gather logs from nearby trees, stripped, smoothed, and stacked like a rolling track. Ropes are woven from agave fibers, thick and scratchy, coiled around the boulder like a hug that hurts. The sculptors grunt, chant, push. You chant too, but mostly just to pretend you're helping. The rock moves. Barely. But it moves. And so begins the crawl. Down forested slopes, through thick marsh, across dry riverbeds. The logs are rotated from back to front, one by one, like a conveyor belt powered by willpower and shin splints. You haul, you trip, you fall into a puddle so deep you briefly consider staying there forever. Days pass. Your hands develop calluses, then blisters, then calluses on those blisters. Your shoulders ache, Your back is a map of regrets. You think maybe you dreamed the concept of furniture. And still the rock rolls forward. One morning, a tree collapses, blocking the path. It takes the better part of a day to chop it apart with stone axes. That night, a rope snaps and the boulder tilts dramatically, forcing everyone to leap back and question their choices. You dream of flat land, of rocks the size of walnuts, of cultures that sculpted in clay. But eventually, you reach the lowland clearing. The rock is in place. Everyone falls silent again. No cheers. No high fives. Just the quiet, breathless respect reserved for moments when something impossible has just happened. You sit down. Your legs won't bend properly anymore. Your palms are raw. Your ears are filled with the sound of mosquitoes laughing behind the trees. But you're here. And the face you're about to carve? It's already inside that rock. You just have to let it out. The stone sits there like it owns the land now. It doesn't shimmer. It doesn't glow. It doesn't do anything except exist in a very large and very immovable way. But there's a tension around it, a stillness that wasn't there before. As if the jungle itself has drawn closer, waiting to see what you'll do next. No one speaks much. You'd think there would be a big celebration. Maybe a ceremonial coconut or at least some gratitude snacks, but no. The moment the boulder settles into its final resting spot, the mood shifts. It's not just a rock anymore. It's a subject, a canvas, a soon-to-be face. You're invited to sit cross-legged around it with the others, which feels nice until your legs go completely numb in the first 5 minutes. The sculptors are pulling out tools, not metal, of course, but stone-on-stone gear. Hammerstones, flint chisels, sandstones. One guy brings a pouch of red ochre and charred sticks. The oldest sculptor approaches the boulder. He pulls out a stick of charcoal and holds it like a brush. Then he leans close and begins to draw. There's no sketchbook, no preliminary drafts, no, oops, layer to erase. He just starts, outlining, freehand, on basalt, like it's a doodle and not a commitment of the next few months of his life. You watch, trying to see the face form. At first, it's just lines. Then a curve that becomes a cheek. A triangle that hints at a nose. A wide jaw, drawn with the kind of confidence only someone with extremely good cheekbone instincts can pull off. Historians still argue whether the Olmec heads were modeled after real rulers or idealized warrior figures. Some facial features vary: flat noses, thick lips, heavy brows, enough to suggest individuality. Others point out similarities between many of the heads, leading to theories of stylized art conventions or even masks of deities. But the truth? The sculptor knew what the face looked like before anyone else did. Your quirky tidbit? One unfinished head still has visible charcoal markings on it. Lines for eyes and nose that never made it past the outline stage. It's like catching a selfie halfway through being chiseled. The sketching continues. No guidelines. No measurements. Just a hand and a memory and a face emerging one careful sweep at a time. You lean back, slightly hypnotized by the way the sculptor circles the rock, darkening certain areas, pausing to squint at others. Every few minutes, he steps away and looks at the whole thing, tilting his head like he's trying to hear what the rock is whispering. Then he draws more. Eventually, the other sculptors take turns marking different parts. One starts outlining the ears, massive, perfectly symmetrical. Another works on the crest of what you think is a helmet, or maybe a crown. Or maybe just a very fancy haircut? You ask quietly. No one answers. Apparently, even asking might ruin the moment. The markings are done by midday. The sun is directly overhead now, casting sharp shadows across the rock face. The features look deeper, more ominous, like the boulder is already waking up. You glance around. The tools are lined up neatly. The sculptors are eating in silence. And you realize something. They're not in a rush. Not because they're lazy, but because they know something you don't. That once you start hitting the stone, there's no going back. You take one last look at the charcoal face, the strong jaw, the arched brow, the slight downturn of the mouth that somehow communicates, "I rule this entire valley and I'm annoyed you're standing on my lawn." It's ready. You? Not so much. But the hammerstone is waiting. And the jungle? The jungle is listening. You blink up at the stone face, still just lines on basalt, and it stares back, unchiseled, unreadable, but somehow already judging your posture. The sculptors rise from their quiet meal like dancers stepping onto stage. No fanfare, no speeches, just a look passed between them, a nod, and then, tap. That's it. One sharp tap of a hammerstone against the basalt. It rings out into the trees like a challenge. Then another. Then another. And then the jungle starts filling with the strangely musical rhythm of stone meeting stone. You're handed a tool, heavier than it looks, smooth from use, with a small notch where someone else's thumb must have rested years ago. You kneel beside the boulder, next to a sculptor working on what will probably become the left cheek. You hesitate. He grins slightly and taps once, showing you. Then gestures toward the edge of the line. You tap. It barely makes a dent. Tap again. Still nothing. Tap harder. Now there's a fleck. A tiny whisper of stone curls away from the surface and tumbles to the ground. Congratulations. You've just removed approximately one eyebrow hair's worth of basalt. At this rate, you'll finish this statue in time for it to be dug up by space archaeologists. Historians still argue whether the Olmec sculptors worked in large teams simultaneously, or whether a small group handled all major features while others focused on smoothing and details. Some believe apprentices were allowed to chip away at the base or less visible areas. Others say each face had a primary master sculptor, sort of a head artist on the head project. Your quirky tidbit? One partially carved stone head was found abandoned in a hillside quarry, halfway finished. Some say the rock cracked. Others think the ruler it was supposed to depict fell from power mid-chisel. There's even a fringe theory that the sculptors just got tired and went to make something smaller, like altars or soup. Your hammering continues. It's not fast work. It's more like a meditation. You tap, then inspect. Tap again. Shift angles. The sculptor next to you chips off a flake the size of your thumbnail and nods like he's just solved a personal mystery. You try to mimic his angle. Instead, you hit a soft spot and send your flake flying sideways into a bush. Something in there hisses. You decide not to investigate. As the sun moves across the sky, the lines on the stone become shallow grooves. The charcoal smudges fade beneath the marks you carve. The face is starting to form now, just faintly. The nose bridge rises. The brows arch with a frown you're starting to feel in your shoulders. The sound of hammerstones never stops. Even during breaks, someone's always tapping something. Testing angles. Sharpening tools. Chipping at the ground as if practicing for the real thing. You pause to stretch and notice the outline of an ear taking shape on the far side of the head. A sculptor uses a smaller stone like a dentist's pick, scraping out the inner curves with surgical care. You swear the ear looks good enough to hear you thinking. Then, a rare burst of laughter, quiet, quick. Someone chipped the nose too much. It's not broken, just assertively lopsided. No one panics. The master sculptor walks over, squints, tilts his head like he's looking at a cloud and trying to decide whether it's a snake or a god, and then gently runs his hand along the damaged ridge. He mutters something. You catch only 2 words. New plan. Apparently, when you carve stone faces the size of buffaloes, flexibility is part of the process. The work resumes. Everyone adjusts. The nose gets a slight bend that somehow makes it look even more regal, like this ruler once took a ceremonial elbow during a ball game and kept ruling anyway. By late afternoon, the rhythm of the work has settled into your bones. Tap, pause, scrape, tap again. The tools aren't tools anymore, they're just extensions of hands. The face, still rough, is no longer hiding in the stone. It's coming out, and even though the eyes haven't been carved yet, you could swear it's already watching you. Evening stretches long across the clearing, tinting the stone face in soft gold. The sculptors are quiet now, not from fatigue, though they're definitely tired, but because there's something sacred about this stage. The face has emerged, not finished, not polished, but undeniably there. And now comes one of the most delicate, mysterious, and slightly intimidating parts of the process: the eyes. But no, you're not starting with those just yet. You're still staring at the nose. You wouldn't think the nose would be such a big deal. After all, it's just a rock schnoz. But in this world, a misaligned nostril is practically a political scandal. The master sculptor crouches in front of the head, arms crossed, studying the nose like it just gave a suspicious answer on a tax form. He reaches for a tiny hammerstone, no bigger than your palm, and taps the tip of the nose once. Just once. Then stands back, nods. Everyone breathes again. Historians still argue whether the Olmec noses were stylized symbols of authority, ethnically specific features of real individuals, or simply artistic convention. Most are broad and flat, with strong bridges, projecting strength, power, and a very "don't mess with me" kind of dignity. Your quirky tidbit? One Olmec head discovered at San Lorenzo has a slight twist in its nostrils, almost like a smirk. Some scholars claim it was intentional, an effort to convey personality. Others think it was a chisel slip that got retroactively declared a creative flourish. You've been assigned to help on the lower face now, the jaw, specifically. It's a beast. Wide, strong, slightly overconfident, and unlike most things you've ever helped make, it will still be here 1,000 years from now, silently judging distant archaeologists. The sculptor beside you hums softly as he chips away at the chin, pausing to brush off debris like he's shaving the boulder with a whisper. You copy him, only your whisper sounds like someone dropped a coconut. It's fine. You're learning. Each chip is like breathing into the stone. Little by little, the cheeks round, the lips thicken, the jaw strengthens. It's subtle work. Everything depends on slope, angle, symmetry. You stare at one side of the face so long you forget the other exists. At one point, a younger sculptor walks around the boulder, squats, and grunts softly. You assume it's a complaint about the mosquitoes, but he's actually just noticed the left ear is 5 millimeters higher than the right. Everyone stops. You all stare. He's right. There's a long silence. Then the master shrugs and says something that translates to, "Maybe this ruler tilted his head a lot." Laughter. Relief. Work continues. There's a theory floating around the camp that the original ruler who inspired this particular stone head had an unusually expressive face. Like he could convey political strategy with a single eyebrow raise. That theory is unproven, but deeply respected. You try working on the lips next. The sculptor next to you shows how to taper the upper curve without making it look like a frown, or worse, a pout. Apparently, stone rulers should not pout. It takes hours to shape the lips. You chip, you scrape, you curse quietly when your hand slips and leaves a faint scratch that only you will ever notice. But now you will always notice it. Still, the mouth emerges. Wide, closed, slightly downturned, a hint of mystery, or maybe just mid-thought. By now, you've forgotten what time it is. The sun has vanished. The jungle has gone from chatty birds to orchestras of frogs and things with more legs than necessary. The camp smells like ash and stone dust and roasted corn. You sit back, brush the grit from your face, and look up. The head stares skyward, not fully finished. but no longer a rock. A face is here now, waiting for eyes, waiting to see. And you? You've spent all day carving someone else's legacy, and somehow, that feels like the most honest kind of immortality. The face is almost complete now, and that should feel like an accomplishment, but instead it just makes you more nervous, because you know what's coming next. The eyes. You've seen how carefully the jaw was shaped, how delicately the lips were curved, but the eyes. The eyes are something else. They're where everything comes alive, or falls apart. No pressure. The sculptors rise early, before the mist has even lifted off the jungle floor. The light is soft, filtered through low clouds and drifting insects, and the stone looks pale and sleepy. Perfect, apparently, for eye carving. You're handed a smaller, flatter hammerstone. It fits in your palm like it was made for nervous beginners, which it probably was. You're not carving the eyes yourself. Thank every ancient deity. That job belongs to the master sculptor and his closest assistant, both of whom have spent the last 2 nights sleeping next to the statue, as if guarding the unfinished gaze from dream spirits or wandering mistakes. The master places both hands gently on the brow, not to measure, just to connect. Then he begins. The carving is slow, shockingly slow. First, the brow line is deepened, shaded just enough to give the illusion of weight. Then he chips a faint curve for the top lid, soft, angled downward, heavy-lidded like a ruler mid-contemplation or perhaps mid-eye roll at some poorly carved offering bowl. Then the pupil. Sort of. The Olmec heads don't have hyper-realistic eyeballs. More often, they're abstract, elliptical, recessed, stylized in ways that suggest intense focus, or eternal observation, or the general vibe of, "I know what you did, and I am not impressed." Historians still argue whether these eyes were meant to represent literal features, symbolic inner sight, or something more ceremonial. Some think they mirrored masks worn during rituals. Others suggest they reflected the sun itself, divine sight chiseled into stone, forever watching the rising sky. Your quirky tidbit? One Olmec head has slightly uneven pupils. Some claim it was a stylistic choice. Others say it might represent a warrior who'd lost an eye. One bold theory? It was carved at a time when the artist was being pressured to finish before the next eclipse and decided, good enough. You don't speak while the eyes are shaped. No one does. It feels like the statue might hear you. The chisel taps lightly, so lightly, like rain falling into a bowl. Each movement is a whisper of depth, a nudge of shadow. And then, they're there. The eyes. They're not symmetrical. Not exactly. But they work. Together. They gaze slightly downward, just enough to look at whoever stands in front of the statue. They don't smile. They don't frown. They just see. You step back, instinctively, and realize you don't want to be in its line of sight. It's not fear. Not exactly. It's reverence. Respect. That chill you get when something inanimate feels briefly, weirdly animate. You glance around. Other sculptors are watching too. Some nod. Some offer a short, ritual phrase that sounds like a blessing. One drops a bit of obsidian into the soil nearby, an offering, maybe, or just a quiet thank you. The face is whole now. But the work isn't done. Far from it. The rest of the body is, well, there is no body. Not with these heads. Just a massive, immovable, deeply expressive face with a flat top, broad cheeks, and that peculiar carved headgear, half helmet, half mystery, like a decorative bowl no one's allowed to touch. You'll start polishing next, and smoothing, and maybe, if you're lucky, resting. But for now, you kneel at the edge of the clearing, look up at what you helped reveal, and feel something settle behind your ribs. The head watches the horizon. And maybe, it watches you too. The jungle has quieted a little now. Even the birds seem to be giving the stone head some space, like they're not quite sure if it's a statue or a god that hasn't finished waking up yet. You stretch out on a mossy log and stare up at the carving, admiring the way the shadows gather beneath the heavy brow ridge. The eyes don't blink, but they don't need to. And now comes the part no one talks about at first. The polishing. The endlessly slow, hand-cramping, finger-numbing, soul-questioning process of smoothing stone with sand. You were kind of hoping someone else would do this. They do not. You're handed a bundle of wet leaves and a gourd filled with fine sand, and pointed toward the forehead like it's the world's grumpiest spa client. So you begin. Dip the leaves. Grab some sand. Rub. That's it. For hours. You'd think it would be boring, and you're not entirely wrong, but there's something almost hypnotic about it. The stone's surface slowly loses its chalky roughness. It starts to gleam just faintly. It begins to feel warm. You imagine that warmth is from your effort, but then again, the Olmecs might say it's the spirit of the sculpture being revealed. Not made, revealed, as if the head was already in there, and all you're doing now is helping it breathe. Historians still argue whether this stage was purely aesthetic, symbolic, or perhaps ritualistic. Some believe the polish gave the statues a kind of divine finish. Others claim it helped protect the surface from the elements. A few say it was a meditative rite, meant to humble the sculptors, force them to slow down, and feel every inch of what they'd made. Your quirky tidbit? Traces of red pigment have been found on some Olmec heads, suggesting they were once painted. That's right. These giant gray faces might once have blazed with red, black, or even blue. Basically, they weren't just judging you. They were judging you in color. You shift to the side of the face now, scrubbing the temple in soft circles, listening to the stone whisper back in grit. Your fingers sting a little. The sand gets under your nails. You keep going. Somewhere to your right, another sculptor is working on the lower lip. He hums as he rubs, same motion, same rhythm. A third is perched dangerously near the crown, polishing the helmet, or cap, or whatever that mysterious headgear is. You finally ask someone what it's supposed to be. He shrugs. Protection? He offers. Ceremony? Another guesses. Hair? Someone else mumbles, not very confidently. One bold theory is that it's a ballgame helmet, like those worn in ritual sport matches played throughout Mesoamerica. The kind of gear that says, "I'm here to compete and be spiritually significant." Other scholars think the helmet-like cap was a stylized headdress or even part of a mask. Some heads have cord patterns, ear ornaments, even what looks like chin straps. One head has a carved starburst on its crown. Another has what looks like braided rope. No one agrees, which means you're free to imagine it's a ceremonial fruit bowl, and no one can stop you. You rub a bit harder. The temple gleams. You move to the jawline, which curves like a mountain ledge, and requires a precarious lean to reach. You wobble. The stone doesn't. You chuckle softly and mutter, "Okay, I get it, you win." It does not reply. But if it did, it would say something like, "Obviously." By late afternoon, the entire team is polishing now. No chipping, no carving, just the soft, collective sound of sand being worked into history. Someone starts singing. A quiet melody. Repetitive. Wordless. Others join. It's not loud. It's not meant to be. Just something to keep your hands steady. Your mind focused. Your body connected to the stone and the sky and the mud between your toes. And maybe, just maybe, the head is listening. Not with ears, but with memory. Because you're not making a statue anymore. You're preparing it for something else. You wake to the sound of humming and the rhythmic slap of cloth against stone. The polishing continues. It always continues. But today, something's different. There's an energy in the air, not loud, not rushed, but anticipatory. Like the moment before the sun crests the trees, or the first breath before a song starts. The face is done. The features are carved. The surface gleams in places like wet obsidian. Now, the sculptors gather to focus on what might be the most debated detail of all. The helmet, or the hat, or the hair, or crown, or ritual noise-canceling headwear. No one really knows. You stare at the top portion of the stone head, hands on hips, as if that'll make the mystery any clearer. It doesn't. The carving isn't flat. It's full of grooves and bands, raised elements that wrap across the forehead and over the temples. Some look like laces, some like straps. Others resemble feathered braids or intricate patterns that might represent fabric, leather, or some long-lost ceremonial banana. Historians still argue whether this upper section represents functional helmets used in ritual ballgames, stylized royal headdresses, or cosmological symbols with meanings we've entirely forgotten. A few believe they're depictions of battle gear. Others insist it's just fashion, ancient, durable, heavy fashion. Your quirky tidbit? One of the San Lorenzo heads features a relief that may depict a jaguar pelt sewn into the headgear. Jaguars were sacred to the Olmec, associated with power, transformation, and possibly a deity that could sneeze stars. Probably. You climb up onto the scaffolding, a wobbly platform of lashed wood poles and grippy optimism, to get a better look. The head rises beneath you like a cliff, its forehead wide and lightly speckled with mineral streaks. You run your fingers along the upper carvings, careful not to overbalance and fall into the world's most historically disrespectful pratfall. Another sculptor joins you. He's carrying a bundle of carving picks, finer tools, shaped from flint and bone, for working detailed grooves. He hands one to you and taps the stone with a sharp little tick-tick-tick, tracing a pattern along the outer edge of what might be ceremonial chords. You mimic the motion. It's harder than it looks. The stone isn't angry, but it's also not cooperative. Each mark requires control, pressure, patience. You dig into the shallow relief, defining a braided loop that curves over the temple. Your fingers cramp. Your back starts muttering complaints in ancient dialects. But it's beautiful, this pattern. Even if you're not sure what it means. That's the thing. None of the sculptors seem too bothered about definitions. They work with memory, with tradition, with inherited hands that know when a curve feels correct. You pause to look down at the face from above. It's not smiling. It never was. But it knows something. You descend, slowly, and walk around the statue. From the front, the face is steady, composed. From the side, it looks thoughtful. From the back, the helmet details twist and braid into something that almost resembles writing. You ask a sculptor if it's a message. He shrugs. Maybe. You ask if it's a name. Could be. You ask if they know what it means. He squints at the rock, then at you. If it's still here in 1,000 years, he says, someone will ask that too. That stops you for a moment. Because this isn't just decoration. It's communication. Sent forward in time to someone who may never understand it. You walk around once more, running your hand along the now smooth cheek, the defined brow, the carefully carved loops of the headgear. You whisper something to it. Not because you expect a reply, but because it feels rude not to. And then you gather your polishing cloth, your tired knees, and your sore fingers, and begin gently working the crown, one final time. Smoothing out the grooves, softening the sharpness, preparing the head for its last day lying down. Because tomorrow, it stands. The sun rises slower today. Or maybe that's just you, trudging across the clearing with half your joints still asleep and a suspicious patch of basalt dust in your ear. The statue gleams faintly under the morning light. Not polished like marble, nothing that's showy, but worn smooth in that way things are when hundreds of hands have passed over them, whispering respect through calluses. Today is the lift, the moment when the head, which has been lying on its back all this time like a sleeping god, is raised upright to meet the world. You thought carving was hard. You thought polishing was intense. You haven't seen anything until you've tried to stand up 20 tons of volcanic rock using nothing but logs, ropes, and an overwhelming amount of hope. The sculptors are already at work, laying the ramp. Not a metal crane or pulley in sight. Just a slope of packed earth and logs, reinforced with wooden scaffolding and more knots than you knew could exist outside of a fishing village. Thick vine ropes stretch across the head like ceremonial spaghetti. You join the group, uncoiling fibers and anchoring stakes into the soil with slow, firm strikes. No one speaks loudly. Everyone feels the weight of what's coming. Historians still argue how exactly the Olmec engineers managed this feat. Some believe ramps and levers were built up in stages. Others suggest earthen platforms that were slowly removed once the head stood upright. A few fringe theorists insist the Olmecs had help from ballgame physics or advanced vibration techniques, which is the polite way of saying, we don't know, but maybe they hummed really hard. Your quirky tidbit? One head at La Venta is slightly tilted, just enough to make archaeologists wonder if the crew had a close call during the lift. It still looks powerful, just slightly annoyed, like it knows it leans to the left and dares you to bring it up. You're assigned to a lever team, which is generous, considering the lever is a long log and your job is basically lean on it as if your life depends on it, because it kind of does. The signal is a low chant. No shouting, just rhythm. The sculptors chant as they pull, as they brace, as they wedge smaller stones under the edge of the base to keep the head from tipping backward and crushing everyone's weight. The head shifts. You feel it before you see it. The groan of fiber tightening, the shudder in the ground, the faint thunk of a buried wedge giving way. And then, motion. It rises slowly. Inches at first. Then a bit more. You strain. Sweat. Pretend you're not terrified. The head begins to tilt forward into the vertical. Ropes creak. Logs pop. Someone stumbles, recovers. Your knees shake. Your palms burn. And then, as if some ancient force finally decides, fine, I'll help, the stone face settles into place. Upright. Facing forward. Watching. Everyone steps back at once. Not to admire. To breathe. There's no cheering. Just a long, collective exhale, like the jungle itself was holding its breath and didn't want to interrupt. You look up. The face has changed. Same lines. Same brows. Same impossible lips. But something happens when it stands. It gains presence. Weight, yes, but also height. Not just in physical space, but in meaning. It no longer lies like an idea, it stands like a statement. The sculptors begin brushing off the last bits of dust. One of them places a bowl of maize at the statue's feet. Another smears a line of red pigment along the base, murmuring something you don't quite catch. It's not ceremony yet. That comes later. But the head is up. The face sees the sun. And you? You stand beneath it. Tired, sore, grimy, and impossibly, inexplicably honored. Night falls like a slow curtain. Not sudden, not sharp, just a gentle dimming, a soft hush settling over the clearing. The giant stone head now stands tall at the edge of the plaza, its features catching the last amber glow of firelight. Shadows pool beneath its jaw. The eyes have taken on a new depth. Not because anything changed, but because you did. Tonight is the offering. The part no one explains, not really. You've heard whispers, seen preparations, but what's about to happen? It's not in any instruction manual. It's just passed down through muscle memory, inherited glances, and stories that begin with, "We always do it this way." Torches are lit and planted in a circle around the head. People gather. Not just the sculptors, but others, elders, children, runners from nearby villages. Some carry bundles wrapped in cloth. Others bring maize, incense, flowers. One arrives with a carved wooden flute and begins to play a tune that's less a melody and more a conversation with the night air. No one tells you where to sit, so you follow the rhythm and settle into a place at the edge, close enough to feel the heat of the flames but far enough to not accidentally offend anyone with your presence or posture. A woman steps forward with a bowl of copal resin and gently feeds the fire. The scent that rises is thick, earthy, sharp, almost sweet. The smoke curls around the statue, embracing it, coiling into the helmet's carved grooves as if the scent is trying to decode the mystery no historian has ever solved. A few words are spoken, not loudly, not for show. Just murmured phrases carried between the torches and the trees. Someone tosses a handful of cacao beans onto the flames. They pop and hiss like tiny declarations. Another offers squash seeds, another a scrap of jaguar fur. Historians still argue whether these offerings were part of a state ritual, an artist's thanks, or a sacred appeasement to the spirits embodied by the stone. Some claim these ceremonies were political. Others call them deeply spiritual. A few think they were practical, an effort to protect the sculpture from time, weather, or worse, forgetting. Your quirky tidbit? A number of Olmec heads were later found intentionally buried, upright, sometimes face down, often beneath layers of clay and sand. Some believe they were retired with ceremony. Others suspect they were hidden from invaders or decommissioned like ancient CEOs stepping down. Respectfully, quietly, covered in earth, the flute player switches melodies. Now it's slower, almost uncertain. Two sculptors rise. They circle the head, each touching a hand to the base, and whispering something that sounds like a question. Another man steps forward and does something unexpected. He lays his forehead gently against the stone. Just for a moment. Then he steps back. No one claps. No one nods. No one has to. That's not what this is. You realize something strange. You've been part of this process for days, maybe weeks, and yet, here in this firelight, you feel like a guest. And not in a bad way. In the best way. Like you've been invited to witness something bigger than art. Bigger than stone. something living. You reach into your own satchel. There's nothing grand in there. Just some river clay you picked up the day the head was stood upright, muddy, cracked, probably crawling with ants. You walk forward and, heart thudding for no particular reason, place a small ball of it at the base of the statue. No one says anything. You bow slightly. Not because anyone told you to. Just because it feels right. And the statue? It doesn't move, doesn't react. But you could swear, just for a second, it sees you. Not with its eyes, but with its weight, with its memory, with the quiet authority of something that will outlast everything else in this firelit clearing. The fire burns low, the songs drift off, and the offerings remain scattered at the base of the head like breadcrumbs for forgotten gods. You rise slowly, legs aching in new and interesting places, and follow the others out of the clearing. No one talks. Not because they're tired, though, yes, that too. But because silence feels like the only fitting punctuation mark for a night like this. The path is lit only by the moon and the occasional flicker of a torch ahead. The jungle, for once, seems to be holding back its usual chorus of chirps, croaks, and cackles. It's as if the trees themselves are watching that stone face behind you, wondering if it's really finished or if, in the darkness, it might just blink. You arrive at a smaller shelter built on the edge of a river. Nothing fancy. Just a few beams, a palm frond roof, and a place to rest. You sit beside a sculptor, both of you soaking in the sound of water moving lazily over stones. He doesn't look at you when he says it. It watches the sunrise now. You nod. Because it does. That's the reason it was placed exactly where it was. Not just for logistics. Not just for balance. But because that exact spot is where the first light of dawn will hit the forehead and trickle down to the eyes. Every morning, this head will wake up. Not symbolically, literally, in light. Historians still argue whether the orientation of the Olmec heads had cosmic significance. Some align with solstices. Others face towards sacred rivers or mountains. A few appear to have been placed to guard ceremonial spaces. Still others point in directions that defy pattern, as if someone important simply said, "I want him to look over there." Your quirky tidbit? At one site, a head was found facing a now dry riverbed. Some believe it once watched over a sacred waterway. Others think it was placed that way to intimidate rival villages upstream. Or maybe, just maybe, it liked the view. You lie down on your woven mat and close your eyes. But you don't sleep. You remember the details. The way the cheeks curve just slightly inward beneath the eyes. The faint line across the helmet that was polished with a leaf-wrapped finger dipped in river sand. The soft humming from the sculptors as they worked late into the night, not because they had to, but because they couldn't stop. And those eyes. Always the eyes. You wonder if, 1,000 years from now, someone will stand where you stood and feel the same things. Awe, confusion, respect, a weird, almost spooky affection for a face they've never met. And then, you laugh. Because you remember your first thought when you saw that boulder back in the quarry. This is impossible. And now? It's standing. It's complete. It's history before it's even old. That night, you dream of stone dust and obsidian flakes, of faces in the jungle that appear only when the moon hits just right, of silent conversations held between chisel strikes and shared glances. You dream of weight, and how it can mean more than heaviness. It can mean presence. It can mean memory. It can mean legacy. When you wake, the river is still whispering beside you. And the head? It's already watching the light come back. The next morning arrives not with fanfare but with steam. The kind that rises off river stones and leaves everything a little blurry, like the jungle's still deciding whether it's ready to be seen yet. You stretch, wince, and then stretch again. Your arms feel like they've been used to hold up the sky, and your fingers are permanently dusted with basalt. Back at the site, the head is just where you left it. Of course it is. But somehow, it feels more alive. The mist clings to its brows, drapes along the jawline, settles into the carved grooves of its mysterious headgear. Morning light creeps toward it like a pilgrim, slow and reverent. Today, your job is simple. Clean up the site. That means brushing away loose rock chips, removing ropes, taking down the scaffolding. It feels anticlimactic, maybe even a little sad. Like striking the set after a grand performance where the star never moved but somehow stole every scene. You climb the scaffold one last time. This time not to carve, not to polish, just to say goodbye. You trace the carved lines across the crown of the head with your fingertips, following curves you helped shape. There's a small notch behind the right temple that you definitely didn't put there, but you love it anyway. Imperfections become stories. As you descend, one of the older sculptors gestures you over. He's kneeling by a pile of woven mats and bundles of cloth. Quietly, he unwraps something small, flat, and dark, an obsidian blade. It's old, chipped, beautiful. He places it in your hands. It's not a gift. It's a gesture. You helped. You learned. You stayed. So now, you carry part of the process forward. You nod, tuck it away, and don't say anything. No one does. Historians still argue whether everyone involved in carving the Olmec heads was a trained artisan, or if there were teams of assistants, apprentices, even seasonal laborers. Some believe master sculptors passed tools down like relics. Others think tools were left behind on purpose, buried near the statues, offerings in their own right. A few even claim that carving a head gave you some kind of social prestige, or just permanent back problems. Your quirky tidbit? At least one Olmec head was discovered with a ring of stone tools buried around its base. Whether for ritual, remembrance, or convenience, no one knows. But you like to imagine each one was placed there by someone who'd swung it until their palms blistered and then, with quiet ceremony, laid it down and said, that's enough. The scaffolding comes down with slow care. No rush, no crashing. Just bundles of rope coiled neatly, logs stacked for firewood or future builds. The clearing starts to look less like a worksite and more like a sacred grove again. A child runs through the grass, barefoot and giggling, and then stops cold when he sees the head. He stares for a long time. Then he waves at it. Just once. You see the sculptors watching. One smiles. Because that's all they need to know the work is finished. You sit for a while beneath a tree near the edge of the clearing. You drink water that tastes faintly of riverbed and dust. You breathe, and slowly, the statue fades into the landscape. Not literally, it's still massive. But its presence shifts. It no longer demands attention. It simply is. Like a hill. Like a monument. Like something that has always been here and always will be. You rise. Brush the dirt from your knees. And begin walking. You don't look back. Not because you're not tempted. But because the statue's already seen you. And, really, that's enough. The jungle trail back is quieter than you remembered. Or maybe you're just listening differently now. The chirps and buzzes, the rustle of leaves, the soft crunch beneath your feet. They all feel less like background noise and more like a kind of rhythm. Like the jungle has been singing this song the whole time and you just didn't know how to hear it. You're walking with some of the sculptors, those who are finished now, for this cycle at least. The others will remain behind a few more days, tending to offerings, brushing away erosion, maybe even carving some smaller altars nearby. But you're heading home, or toward the next place, whichever comes first. At some point, someone says the word, done. Another replies, only for now. And that's how you realize, none of this was meant to be permanent. Not the ropes, not the scaffolding, not even the tools. Just the head. The face. The memory. You break camp at a smaller site halfway down the trail. It's not much. Just a clearing near a rock shelf with a view of the lowlands stretching hazily into the distance. As you sit and share roasted maize and some kind of tuber you still can't pronounce, one of the older sculptors pulls out a piece of bark cloth with a rough charcoal sketch on it. It's a face. Round. Broad. Familiar. Not a copy. A memory. He adds a quick line. A shadow under the eye. A sharper tilt to the brow. You realize they sketched the faces afterward. Not before. Not as blueprints, but as echoes. Reminders. A way to carry the image forward without the weight. Historians still argue whether Olmec heads had standardized designs or if each one was truly unique. Some show patterns that repeat across sites. Others appear to stand completely alone. Single expressions of rulers long forgotten. There are even theories that some heads were made to replace others destroyed or lost. But nothing's conclusive, because even now, we still don't know the names behind the stone. Your quirky tidbit? At least one Olmec head has signs of being reburied multiple times. Dug up, reburied, dug up again. Some think it was part of a seasonal ritual. Others suggest it was hidden, protected from conquerors or floods. Either way, it means someone kept coming back. Someone remembered. That idea stays with you. That people returned to the heads, not to add to them, not to fix them, but just to be there. You think of the one you helped carve. It's standing now, but someday it'll be buried. Maybe accidentally, maybe on purpose. And someday, someone else will find it. They'll brush away the soil. They'll see the brow, the nose, the lips. They won't know your name. They'll never know which piece you chipped or which groove you polished. But they'll know someone was there. They'll know the work was done. And that's the point, isn't it? You eat your last bite of maize. Stand, stretch. Feel your bones creak like old tools settling into a new purpose. The sun is setting again. This time, behind you. You don't feel tired. You feel finished. Not forever. Just for now. You adjust the obsidian blade in your satchel. Take one last look at the sketch, now tucked into bark cloth and tied with string. Then you begin walking again. Toward the next mountain. The next face. The next memory waiting in stone. You come into the next village like someone returning from a dream. Everything is smaller here. Huts with walls of woven cane. Gardens full of squash blossoms and drying maize. A plaza where kids chase a carved rubber ball with the kind of intensity usually reserved for prophecy. The people smile at the sculptors, offering bowls of atoli, roasted plantains, and the occasional knowing glance. They don't ask what you made. They already know. Not the details, not which head, but the weight of your silence, the slowness in your hands, the red dust still ghosting your hair. These say enough. You sit under a thatched roof and slowly peel open your fingers. Your knuckles crack like bark in dry season. One of the children watches with wide eyes, then mimics the sound with his own little fingers. You offer him your empty gourd and he runs off with it like you just gave him the moon. Later, someone brings out a woven mat and spreads it across the ground. A kind of map, really, made of reed and dyed string, showing rivers, trails, sacred mountains, and small round shapes scattered across the lowlands. You realize, slowly, that those circles represent heads. Not villages. Not gods. Heads. This map doesn't mark cities. It marks memories. Historians still argue how widespread the Olmec head carving tradition really was. Some heads are found in clusters. Others seem isolated, as if they were meant to stand alone. A few were found far from any known settlement. Some even show signs of being moved multiple times, as if they were traveling monuments. Faces meant to go wherever the story needed to be told. Your quirky tidbit? At one site, sculptors reused a colossal head base as a platform for a later altar. That altar was eventually buried, then dug up centuries later. 3 layers of memory, stacked like time forgot how to move forward properly. You study the mat. Someone taps their finger gently on one of the symbols. It's close to where you were, but not quite. Then they tap another, farther away, near a bend in a river you've never seen. They smile. It's not a question. It's a suggestion. A new face. A new stone. A new place to carve something that will outlast your name. That night, the fire is small. Just a cooking flame, really, flickering between 3 stones. A pot of something spicy bubbles gently, and you cradle your bowl like a treasure, breathing in its warmth and feeling your fingertips finally lose their stiffness. Someone begins to hum. Another taps a rhythm on an overturned gourd. A woman sings. Softly. No words. Just melody, rising like smoke above the coals. It curls around the rafters, into the night, past the treetops where the stars begin to flicker one by one. And somewhere, not too far away, a stone head stands in the dark. It doesn't move, but you know, deep in your aching, calloused hands, it doesn't need to. Because it already spoke, and someone, someday, will listen. Morning comes gently, as if trying not to wake the stones. You sit with your back against a tree, sipping warm atole, watching the steam drift across the village's little square. The mat with the memory map is rolled up now, tucked into someone's satchel, but its impression lingers, like everything else in this place. You don't say much. You've learned that quiet is a kind of conversation here. The sculptors prepare to leave. Some are heading home, some to other sites, some into the forest in search of more stone. Tools are packed away, wrapped in fiber cloth and tied with reeds. Not polished, not framed, just used. You tuck your own obsidian blade carefully back into its pouch. It's lighter now, or maybe you're just stronger. Someone passes you a small bundle, dried fruit, crushed maize cakes, a strip of smoked fish. A traveler's meal, no fanfare, just what's needed for the road. Then, with no real signal, the group begins to move. You look back once, only once, and then your feet take you onward, into the forest, where the path narrows and the air thickens again. And you begin to wonder. You wonder if the face you helped carve will still be standing 1,000 years from now. You wonder who will find it, what they'll see in those carved lines, that heavy brow, those eyes forever half-lidded in a judgment that somehow still feels affectionate. You wonder if they'll know someone like you helped carve it, or if they'll make up stories. You kind of hope they do. Because the truth is good, but the mystery is better. Historians still argue whether the Olmec were the mother culture of Mesoamerica or just one part of a wider network of exchange, symbolism, and slow-building legend. Some say they invented writing, or bloodletting rituals, or the sacred ball game. Others believe they passed along knowledge in more subtle ways, through iconography, through monuments, through expressions carved so deeply into stone they ripple across centuries. Your quirky tidbit? Some of the heads still bear faint tool marks on the sides, like tiny signatures hidden in shadow. Not official inscriptions, not names, but traces of touch. Evidence that hands once worked there. That someone leaned in close, squinted against the sun, and whispered, "Just one more tap." You reach a hilltop just before dusk. The path opens, and below you, another clearing. Another boulder. Not shaped yet, not marked, just sitting there, as if it's been waiting quietly for the right set of hands to find it. The others see it too. No one rushes forward. They just stand beside you, breathing it in. The size, the weight, the invitation. Tomorrow, you'll begin again. Not to repeat, but to remember, to honor, to leave behind a face where a story once was. You sit beneath a tree as night spreads its cool hush over the valley. The stars begin to prick holes in the sky. Your shoulders ache, your palms are raw, your satchel is lighter. But your memory? Your memory is full. Wind down, approximately equals 300 words. So now, just settle. Let the jungle fade away. Let the sweat dry from your arms, the dust fall from your hair, the heaviness in your limbs remind you that you've helped carve something far larger than yourself. Let your breath slow, like a river rounding a bend. Let your heartbeat drift into that same rhythm as the hammerstones you once held, steady, soft, certain. You don't need to know how long the head will last. You don't need to explain the shape of the nose, or why the helmet curls just so, or what the face was meant to say. It said something, and that's enough. Sleep now with that same stillness the head had before it woke. The same weight, the same peace. Let the memories linger in the quiet, not the ache, not the heat, not the swarms of biting things that nature absolutely over-designed, but the rhythms. The laughter. The slow unfolding of something beautiful that didn't need words to matter. Maybe you're still carving, even now. Maybe your dreams are stone, and your breath is the polishing cloth, and your thoughts tonight are part of something bigger than you can name. Let the moon rise. Let the stars settle. Let the stone head you helped create keep watch. Always.